The transport ship moved through space like a metal fish swimming through an ocean of stars. Inside the passenger section, Jake Morrison sat quietly in his seat, looking out the small window at the growing space station ahead. The Galactic Combat Academy on Kepler Station looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness, with long arms reaching out in all directions. Jake had been traveling for 3 weeks to get here. He was the first human ever chosen for the Academy's exchange program. Back on Earth, everyone said it was a great honor. His commanding officers told him he was representing all of humanity. The pressure felt heavy on his shoulders, but Jake had always been good at handling pressure. The space station grew larger as they got closer. Jake could see small ships flying around it like bees around a hive. Some were carrying supplies, others were bringing new students from different worlds. Each ship looked different because each one came from a different planet with different people. Jake touched the small bag at his feet. It contained everything he owned that mattered. A few changes of clothes, some photos from home, and his grandfather's old military knife. The knife was more than 100 years old, but it was still sharp. His grandfather had carried it in 3 different wars on Earth. The ship docked with a soft bump that Jake barely felt. Other passengers began to stand up and gather their things. Most of them were not human. Jake saw a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms. Another passenger looked like a walking tree with eyes. A third one seemed to be made of living crystal that changed colors as it moved. All of these beings were going to the same place Jake was going. They were all students at the academy. Jake wondered what they thought of him. Did they know he was from Earth? Did they know Earth was what the galaxy called a death world? Jake had learned about this during his briefing before the trip. Most planets in the galaxy were safe and peaceful places. The weather was always nice. The animals were gentle. The people had evolved in harmony with their worlds. Earth was different. Earth was dangerous. Earth had storms that could destroy cities, animals that could kill with their teeth and claws, and gravity so strong it would crush most alien visitors. The docking tube connected to the ship with a hiss of air. Jake stood up and followed the other passengers toward the exit. His muscles felt good after sitting for so long. Earth's gravity was much stronger than the artificial gravity on the ship. Jake had been doing exercises in his room to stay strong, but it felt good to move normally again. The space station's gravity was set to match most of the alien species. For Jake, it felt like walking on the moon. Each step was light and easy. He had to be careful not to jump too high or move too fast. The other students moved normally, but Jake felt like he could run up walls if he wanted to. A voice spoke over the station's communication system. It sounded like clicking and buzzing noises, but Jake's translator device changed it into English, words he could understand. The voice welcomed all new students to the Galactic Combat Academy and told them to report to the main assembly hall. Jake followed the signs through the station's corridors. The walls were smooth and white, with soft lights that seemed to come from nowhere. Everything was clean and perfect. It was very different from the military bases on Earth, which were usually made of concrete and steel, and always smelled like oil and cleaning chemicals. The assembly hall was huge. Jake estimated it could hold 1,000 people. About 200 students were already there, sitting in rows of seats that could adjust to fit different body types. Jake found an empty seat near the back and sat down carefully. The seat molded itself to fit his human shape. Looking around the room, Jake realized he was probably the only human there. Most of the other students were taller than him, with thin builds and delicate features. They came from worlds where survival was easy, where they never had to fight for food or shelter or safety. Jake came from a world where everything was trying to kill you, and only the strong and smart survived. 3 figures walked onto the stage at the front of the hall. These were clearly the instructors. The first one looked like a giant insect, with a hard shell covering its body and long arms that ended in sharp claws. Its eyes were large and dark, and they seemed to see everything at once. This was Master Zeth-Ka, a Thrikari warrior. The second instructor looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body was transparent and colored lights moved through it like liquid rainbows. When it moved, it made soft musical sounds. This was Instructor Halvex, a Volnari combat specialist. The third instructor was shorter than the others but looked very strong. Its skin was green and covered with small scales. It had 4 arms and moved with the grace of a dancer. Jake did not recognize this species, but he could tell it was dangerous just by the way it held itself. Master Zethka stepped forward and began to speak. The clicking and buzzing sounds came from its mouth, but Jake's translator turned them into words he could understand. Welcome, students, to the Galactic Combat Academy. You are here because you are the best warriors your species can offer. You will learn techniques that have been developed over thousands of years by dozens of different civilizations. You will become masters of combat, strategy, and warfare. The insect instructor's dark eyes swept across the room, pausing for a moment. When they found Jake felt like he was being studied, examined, judged. He kept his face calm and met the alien's gaze without flinching. Each of you will be tested, Master Zethka continued. We must understand your capabilities before we can teach you. Tomorrow, we will begin with combat demonstrations. Each student will face 3 opponents in sparring matches. These matches will show us your strengths and weaknesses. Jake felt his heart beat a little faster. He had trained for this, but training on Earth was different from fighting aliens with abilities he had never seen before. Some of these species could probably do things humans couldn't even imagine. Instructor Halvex moved forward, its crystal body singing softly. When it spoke, the words sounded like music mixed with the wind. Do not be afraid of tomorrow's tests. They are not meant to harm you. They are meant to help us understand how to make you better warriors. Each species has different advantages. Each species has different ways of fighting. The green-scaled instructor spoke next. Its voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding against each other. Remember that strength is not just about muscles. Intelligence, speed, timing, and strategy are all forms of strength. The greatest warrior is not always the biggest or the strongest. Sometimes the greatest warrior is the one who thinks differently from everyone else. Jake nodded slightly. This was something his trainers on Earth had taught him. Humans were not the biggest or strongest species on their own planet, but they had survived by being smart, adaptable, and working together. Maybe those same qualities would help him here. The assembly ended with instructions about where to find the dormitories, the dining hall, and the training facilities. Students began to file out of the hall, talking quietly among themselves in dozens of different languages. Jake noticed that several of them were looking at him with curiosity. Word had probably spread that there was a human at the academy. Jake made his way to his assigned room. It was small but comfortable, with a bed that adjusted to fit his body, a desk, and a window that looked out into space. He unpacked his few belongings and placed his grandfather's knife on the desk where he could see it. Tomorrow would be his first real test. Jake had no idea what to expect from his alien opponents, but he knew one thing for certain. He would not embarrass humanity. He would show these aliens that humans belonged among the galaxy's greatest warriors. Outside his window, the stars watched and waited. Jake woke up before the artificial sunrise on the space station. His body clock was still set to Earth time, and he had always been an early riser anyway. He did his usual morning exercises in his small room, push-ups and sit-ups and stretches that kept his muscles ready for action. The low gravity made everything easier, but Jake was careful to maintain his Earth strength conditioning. After a quick shower, Jake made his way to the dining hall. The food dispensers offered meals from dozens of different worlds. Most of it looked strange to human eyes. There were things that glowed, things that moved slightly on the plate, and things that changed color as they cooled down. Jake found something that looked like bread and something else that tasted like chicken. It was probably not chicken, but it was good enough. Other students were eating their breakfasts and talking quietly. Jake noticed that many of them kept glancing at him. Word had definitely spread that a human was at the academy. Jake ate calmly and ignored the stares. He had been stared at before. Being the only human in a room full of aliens was not much different from being the only soldier from a small town in a room full of city soldiers. Master Zethka entered the dining hall and walked directly to Jake's table. The large insect instructor moved with surprising grace for something so big. Its hard shell caught the light as it moved, and its dark compound eyes seemed to look in several directions at once. Human Morrison, Master Zethka said in its clicking voice. You will be the first to demonstrate today. Are you prepared? Jake finished his bite of fake chicken and looked up at the alien instructor. Yes, Master. I'm ready. Good. Report to Combat Arena 7 in 1 hour. Your opponents are already being prepared. The insect paused for a moment, studying Jake with those alien eyes. I am curious to see what a Deathworlder can do. Jake nodded politely. After the instructor left, he finished his breakfast and returned to his room to change into his training clothes. Simple gray pants and a matching shirt, both made of tough fabric that could handle rough treatment. He laced up his boots carefully and made sure everything fit properly. Bad equipment could get you killed in a real fight. The walk to Combat Arena 7 took Jake through several sections of the space station. He passed laboratories where alien scientists worked on projects he could not understand. He saw workshops where technicians built and repaired equipment. He walked past observation decks where other students watched the stars and talked about their homeworlds. The combat arena was a large circular room with a raised platform in the center. Energy barriers surrounded the platform to protect the spectators. Around the edges of the fighting area, weapon racks held training tools from different cultures. There were swords and staffs and things Jake did not recognize but assumed were weapons. About 50 students had gathered to watch. They sat in tiers of seats that rose up from the arena floor. Jake could see representatives from at least a dozen different species. Some looked like humans with minor changes. Others were so different that Jake had trouble figuring out which end was the head. Master Zethka stood near the arena controls. Instructor Halvex was there too, its crystal body shimmering with different colors. Jake noticed several other instructors he had not seen before. They were all watching him with the same curious expression. Human Morrison, Master Zethka called out. Please enter the arena. Jake climbed the steps to the fighting platform. The surface was covered with a material that provided good traction without being rough enough to cause serious injuries. Small obstacles were scattered around the area, giving fighters places to use for cover or tactical advantage. Your first opponent is Rixtor of the Vallani, the instructor announced. The Vallani are pack hunters who evolved on a world with vast grasslands. They are known for their speed and their ability to work together in coordinated attacks. A door opened on the far side of the arena, and Jake's first opponent entered. Rixtor was tall and thin, with long arms and legs that seemed designed for running. His skin was a pale yellow color, and his fingers ended in small but sharp claws. He moved like a cat, smooth and silent. The alien warrior bowed formally to Jake, who returned the bow with equal respect. This was not a fight to the death. This was a test, a learning experience, but Jake knew that the line between testing and real fighting could disappear very quickly. Begin when ready, Master Zethka announced. Rixtor immediately began to circle around Jake, staying near the edge of the fighting area. His movements were fluid and graceful, like a dancer performing a routine he had practiced 1,000 times. Jake turned to keep facing his opponent, but he stayed in the center of the platform. The alien warrior was looking for weaknesses, testing Jake's reactions. Every few seconds, Rixtor would feint toward Jake, pretending to attack but pulling back at the last moment. He was learning how Jake moved, how fast he could turn, where he liked to keep his hands. Jake stood perfectly still except for the slow turning to track his opponent. His breathing was steady and controlled. His hands hung at his sides, loose and ready. To the watching aliens, he probably looked calm or maybe even bored. But Jake was using every second to study Rixtor. The Vallani warrior moved like he had joints in places where humans did not have joints. His spine could bend in ways that would break a human back. His arms could rotate almost completely around. But Jake was learning the pattern. Every species had limitations, even if they were different limitations than humans had. Rixtor's circling movements were getting tighter, bringing him closer to Jake with each pass. The alien was building up to his real attack, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Jake could see the tension building in his opponent's muscles. When Rixtor finally attacked, it was faster than most humans could have followed. The alien Warrior launched himself forward in a blur of motion, his clawed hands reaching for Jake's throat and chest at the same time. It was a move designed to overwhelm an opponent with speed and multiple attack angles. Jake was not there when the claws arrived. He had shifted his weight and stepped aside just enough to let Rixtor's momentum carry the alien past him. As the Villani warrior flew by, Jake's right hand moved in a short, precise strike to a spot just behind Rixtor's left shoulder. The alien crashed to the platform floor and did not get up. He was breathing, but his limbs were not responding properly. Jake had hit a nerve cluster that temporarily paralyzed the warrior's motor functions. The arena was completely silent. Jake helped Rixtor sit up and checked to make sure the alien was not seriously injured. The paralysis would wear off in a few minutes, but right now the Villani warrior could barely move his arms. "How?" Rixtor whispered in his own language. Jake's translator picked up the word and converted it to English. "Pressure points," Jake said quietly. "Every species has them. The locations are different, but the principle is the same." Master Zeth-Ka climbed onto the platform to check on Rixtor. The insect instructor's compound eyes studied the spot where Jake had struck. "Interesting. You disabled him without causing permanent damage, but with perfect precision. How did you know where to strike?" Jake helped Rixtor to his feet as feeling began to return to the alien's limbs. "I watched how he moved. I could see where his nerve centers had to be based on his joint structure and muscle placement." The instructor made a note on a small device. "Most impressive. Are you ready for your second opponent?" Jake looked around the arena. The watching students were no longer talking among themselves. They were all staring at him with new respect and maybe a little fear. The human from the Death World had just defeated one of their best fighters with a single, perfectly placed strike. "I'm ready," Jake said. As the arena was reset for the next match, Jake noticed that more instructors had arrived to watch. Word was spreading through the station that something unusual was happening in Combat Arena 7. The human was not fighting like they had expected. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the platform and waited for his second opponent. He was representing all of humanity, and so far, humanity was doing just fine. The arena maintenance crew worked quickly to prepare the platform for the second match. They moved the small obstacles to new positions and checked the energy barriers that protected the spectators. Jake noticed that the number of people watching had doubled since his first fight. Students and instructors were filing into the arena, word having spread throughout the station about the human's unusual fighting style. Jake stood quietly in his corner of the platform, controlling his breathing and staying relaxed. His grandfather had taught him that staying calm between fights was just as important as staying calm during fights. A warrior who got excited or nervous would make mistakes, and mistakes could be deadly. Master Zeth-Ka approached with another alien instructor that Jake had not met before. This new instructor was shorter than the insect master, with thick gray skin that looked like armor plating. Its eyes were small and deep-set, and its mouth was filled with blunt teeth designed for crushing rather than cutting. "Human Morrison," Master Zeth-Ka said, "your second opponent represents a very different fighting philosophy. This is Instructor Gromrex of the Thugani. His people evolved as natural tanks, built for absorbing damage and delivering overwhelming force." The gray-skinned instructor nodded at Jake with what might have been respect. The human fought well against speed and precision. Now he will face strength and endurance. We shall see how Deathworld training serves him against an opponent who cannot be disabled with a single strike. Jake bowed politely to both instructors. He was learning that each species had its own way of showing respect, and it was important to acknowledge their customs. The Thugani instructor returned the bow with a slight bend of his thick neck. "Your opponent is Kreshnar," Master Zeth-Ka announced to the watching crowd. "He is one of our most promising students in heavy combat techniques." The arena door opened again and Jake's second opponent entered. Kreshnar was massive, easily twice Jake's weight and half again as tall. His skin was the same gray armor plating as the instructor, but thicker and more pronounced. His arms were like tree trunks, and his legs looked like they could kick through a steel wall. The Thugani student moved with surprising grace for something so large, but Jake could see that this grace came from perfect balance rather than speed or flexibility. Kreshnar was built like a living fortress, designed to absorb punishment and keep fighting. The two fighters met in the center of the platform for the traditional pre-combat bow. Up close, Jake could see that Kreshnar's armor plating was not just for show. It was thick enough to stop most weapons and positioned perfectly to protect vital organs. This was going to be a very different kind of fight. "I have heard about your victory over Rixtor," Kreshnar said in a voice like grinding stone. "Pressure points will not work on Thugani anatomy. Our nerve clusters are buried deep beneath natural armor. You will need a different strategy, human." Jake smiled slightly. "I appreciate the advice. I'll try to make this interesting for both of us." The two fighters returned to opposite sides of the platform. Master Zethka raised one clawed hand, then dropped it to signal the beginning of the match. Kreshnar immediately charged forward, like an avalanche given legs. His strategy was simple and effective. Use his superior mass and natural armor to overwhelm his opponent through pure force. Most fighters would either try to run away or attempt to use weapons against his thick hide. Jake did neither. Instead of retreating, he moved forward to meet the charge. This surprised several of the watching aliens, who began clicking and whistling, in their various languages. To them, it looked like the small human was about to be crushed by the living tank bearing down on him. As Kreshnar closed the distance, Jake could feel the platform vibrating under the aliens' thundering footsteps. The Thugani warriors' massive fists were raised, ready to deliver crushing blows that would end the fight in seconds. At the last possible moment, Jake dropped into a low crouch and rolled forward. Kreshnar's fists swept through the air where Jake's head had been a split second before. As the alien's momentum carried him forward, Jake's hands found specific spots on the warrior's heavily armored legs. The sound of Jake's strikes echoed through the arena like hammer blows on an anvil, but instead of trying to break through the armor, Jake was targeting the joints where even the thickest plating had to be flexible. His fingers found pressure points that existed regardless of how much natural protection covered them. Kreshnar's legs buckled and the massive warrior crashed to the platform with a sound like a building falling down. He was not unconscious, but his legs were not responding to his commands. The nerve strikes had temporarily disrupted the signals from his brain to his muscles. The arena fell silent again. Even the Thugani instructor looked stunned. Kreshnar was trying to push himself up with his arms, but without his legs, he could not stand. The fight was over. Jake knelt beside his opponent to check for serious injuries. Kreshnar's armor had protected him from any real damage, but the nerve disruption would take several minutes to wear off. "How is this possible?" Kreshnar asked, his voice filled with confusion. "My armor should have protected me from any attack you could deliver." "Armor protects against outside attacks," Jake explained quietly. "But it can't protect against attacks on your own nervous system. Every joint that allows you to move is also a point where nerves have to pass close to the surface." Master Zethka climbed onto the platform again, this time accompanied by instructor Gromrex. The Thugani teacher examined his student carefully, checking the points where Jake had struck. "Remarkable," Gromrex said in his grinding voice. "The human-targeted nerve bundles that most species do not even know exist in Thugani anatomy. How did you learn our physiology?" Jake helped Kreshnar sit up as feeling began to return to the alien's legs. "I didn't study your specific anatomy, but all mobile species have certain things in common. Joints need to be flexible, which means the armor can't be as thick there. Nerves have to pass through those flexible areas to control the muscles. Find the joint, find the nerve, apply the right pressure in the right place." Several of the watching students were taking notes on small devices. Jake realized that he was not just demonstrating human fighting techniques. He was teaching alien warriors how to think about combat in ways they had never considered. Instructor Halvex approached the platform, its crystal body pulsing with different colors. When it spoke, the musical tones carried a note of excitement. "Human Morrison, you have now defeated opponents representing two completely different combat philosophies. Speed and precision, then strength and endurance. Both victories were achieved through superior knowledge of anatomy and nerve function. Is this typical of human military training?" Jake considered the question carefully. He did not want to reveal too much about human capabilities. But he also did not want to lie to his instructors. Humans study anatomy because we need to understand how bodies work. We study pressure points because we need to know how to stop an enemy quickly and efficiently. We study different fighting styles because we never know what kind of opponent we might face. Master Zethka made more notes on his device. Your species appears to approach combat as a science rather than an art. Most species develop one primary fighting method and perfect it over generations. Humans seem to collect and adapt methods from multiple sources. We learn from everyone, Jake agreed. If an enemy has a technique that works, we figure out how to do it ourselves or how to counter it. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've gotten good at it because the ones who weren't good at it didn't survive to have children. The medical team arrived to help Kreshnar off the platform. The big warrior was able to walk now, though his legs were still a bit unsteady. As he passed Jake, he stopped and placed one massive hand on the human's shoulder. You fight with honor, human. I would be proud to call you battle brother. Jake clasped the alien's armored forearm in the traditional warrior's greeting. The honor is mine, Kreshnar. You're tougher than any opponent I've faced on Earth. As the arena was prepared for the third and final match, Jake noticed that the crowd of spectators had grown even larger. Students from all over the station were arriving to watch the human's last demonstration. Some were recording the matches on their devices. Others were sketching diagrams of Jake's techniques. Jake Morrison had come to the Galactic Combat Academy as a student, but he was quickly becoming a teacher. The aliens were learning that humans brought more than just Deathworld reflexes to combat. They brought thousands of years of accumulated knowledge about how to fight anything that moved. The third opponent would be the most challenging yet, but Jake was ready. He represented humanity among the stars, and he would not let his species down. The arena had become packed with spectators. Jake could see that every seat was filled and more aliens were standing in the back areas. Students, instructors, and even maintenance workers had come to watch the human's final demonstration. The buzz of conversation in dozens of different languages filled the air like the sound of a busy marketplace. Jake stood in his corner of the platform, stretching his muscles and keeping his body loose. 2 victories were good, but the third opponent would be the most challenging. He could see the arena crew making major changes to the fighting area. They were installing floating platforms at different heights, energy barriers that could be moved during combat, and weapon racks with more sophisticated equipment. Master Zethka approached with a third instructor that Jake had not seen before. This alien was the most unusual yet. It looked almost human, but its skin had a slight blue tint and its eyes were larger than normal. More importantly, Jake could feel something strange about this instructor's presence, like standing near a powerful electrical generator. Human Morrison, Master Zethka said, your final opponent represents the most advanced combat philosophy we teach at this academy. This is Master Velthara of the Mentari. Her people have elevated fighting to an art form that combines physical skill, mental discipline, and energy manipulation. Master Velthara bowed gracefully to Jake. When she moved, Jake noticed that small objects near her seemed to shift slightly, as if she was surrounded by an invisible force field. The human has shown impressive knowledge of anatomy and tactics. Now we shall see how he adapts to an opponent who can manipulate the battlefield itself. Jake returned the bow, but kept his eyes on the alien instructor. He had read about species that could move objects with their minds, but he had never faced one in combat. This would be entirely new territory. Your opponent is Sal Ix, Master Velthara announced. He is our most gifted student in the art of combat meditation. He has studied for 7 years to reach his current level of skill. The arena door opened, and Jake's final opponent entered. Salix moved like water flowing downhill, each step perfectly balanced and controlled. He was carrying what looked like a staff made of pure energy, and small objects around him floated gently in the air as if gravity did not affect them. The alien warrior was tall and thin like Rixtor had been, but where the Villani fighter had moved with animal grace, Salix moved with the precision of a master craftsman. Every gesture was deliberate, every breath controlled. This was clearly someone who had spent years perfecting his art. As Salix approached the center of the platform, The floating platforms around the arena began to move slowly through the air. Energy barriers shifted position, creating a three-dimensional maze of obstacles and cover. Jake realized that this fight would not be confined to the ground level. "I have observed your previous matches," Salix said in a voice like wind through leaves. "You fight with knowledge and precision, but you rely on close contact with your opponents. This match will test your ability to adapt when your enemy controls the environment around you." Jake nodded respectfully. "I'm honored to face such a skilled opponent. I'll do my best to make this a learning experience for both of us." The two fighters took their positions at opposite ends of the platform. Master Zeth Ka raised his clawed hand, but before he could signal the start of the match, Sal Ix began what looked like a formal dance. The alien warrior moved through a series of flowing motions, his energy staff tracing patterns in the air that seemed to glow briefly before fading. Jake watched carefully, trying to understand what he was seeing. This was clearly some kind of preparation ritual, but it was also more than that. The floating platforms around the arena were responding to Salix's movements, adjusting their positions to create specific patterns and pathways. When Master Zeth Ka finally dropped his hand to begin the match, Salix was ready. The alien warrior launched into immediate action, but not in the direct way that Jake's previous opponents had attacked. Instead, Salix began moving through the arena's three-dimensional maze, using the floating platforms like stepping stones. As he moved, Salix directed attacks at Jake from multiple angles. Energy blasts fired from his staff, while objects around the arena flew through the air toward the human. It was like fighting three different opponents at the same time. Jake found himself dodging energy bolts while blocking flying debris and trying to track his opponent's position as Sal Ix leaped from platform to platform. Most fighters would have been overwhelmed by the complexity of the attack, but Jake had trained for chaotic combat situations on Earth. Instead of trying to respond to each individual attack, Jake began to look for patterns. Salix's movements were beautiful and graceful, but they followed rules. The energy attacks came at specific intervals. The thrown objects followed predictable trajectories. Even the platform movements had a rhythm to them. Jake began to move through the attack pattern like he was dancing to music only he could hear. He ducked under energy blasts that had not been fired yet, stepped aside from objects that were still seconds away from reaching him, and moved toward positions that would put him closer to his opponent when Salix completed his current sequence of movements. The watching aliens began to murmur in amazement. Jake was not just avoiding the attacks, he was predicting them. He moved through the complex assault like he had choreographed it himself. Sal Ix noticed that his attacks were not having the expected effect. The alien warrior increased the intensity of his assault, firing energy blasts more rapidly and hurling larger objects through the air. But Jake continued to flow through the attacks like water finding its way around rocks. As Jake closed the distance between them, Salix realized that the human was not just dodging randomly. Every movement was bringing Jake closer to the floating platform where the alien warrior was currently positioned. The human had somehow calculated the exact path through the three-dimensional maze of attacks. When Jake finally reached striking distance, he moved with the same explosive speed that had surprised his previous opponents. But this time, instead of targeting pressure points, Jake grabbed Salix's energy staff and used the alien's own momentum to redirect his movement. Salix found himself flying through the air, his concentration broken, and his mental control over the arena's equipment disrupted. The floating platform stopped moving, and the energy barriers returned to their default positions. The alien warrior landed hard on the main platform, his staff rolling away across the floor. Jake was beside him instantly, but instead of delivering a finishing strike, he helped Salix sit up and checked him for injuries. The alien was stunned but not seriously hurt. "How?" Salix asked, his voice filled with wonder. "My attacks were coming from every direction. No opponent has ever been able to predict the pattern of combat meditation." Jake sat down beside his defeated opponent, breathing heavily for the first time since the matches had begun. Pattern recognition is something humans are good at. Your movements were beautiful, but they followed mathematical principles. Once I understood the math, I could predict where you would be and where your attacks would come from. Master Velthera approached the platform, her large eyes wide with surprise. Impossible. Combat meditation is designed to be unpredictable. The patterns are too complex for most minds to follow. Maybe for most minds, Jake said quietly. But humans have been tracking complex patterns for thousands of years. We used to hunt animals that could run faster than us, see better than us, and hear better than us. The only way we could catch them was by predicting where they would go, before they knew it themselves. The arena was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station's machinery seemed to have stopped. Jake had defeated 3 opponents representing the Academy's primary combat philosophies, and he had done it by thinking differently than anyone expected. Master Zeth Ka climbed onto the platform with all 3 alien instructors following behind him. The insect warrior's compound eyes studied Jake with something that looked like respect mixed with concern. "Human Morrison," the master said slowly, "you have demonstrated capabilities that we did not expect. Your species appears to approach combat as both science and art, combining analytical thinking with instinctive responses. This is not what we anticipated from a Deathworld species." Jake stood up and helped Salix to his feet. "What did you expect?" "We expected brute force, we expected aggression. We expected the crude tactics of a species that survived through violence alone." Master Zethka paused, his mandibles clicking softly. "We did not expect intelligence, adaptability, and wisdom." Jake looked around at the hundreds of alien faces, watching him from the arena seats. "Wisdom comes from surviving long enough to learn from your mistakes. Humans have made a lot of mistakes over the years, but the ones who lived through them passed their knowledge on to the next generation. That's how we got good at fighting. We learned from everyone who came before us." The 3 instructors exchanged glances, communicating in some way that Jake could not understand. Finally, Master Velthera spoke. "Human Morrison, would you be willing to remain at the Academy beyond the standard exchange period? We believe there is much we could learn from each other." The arena remained silent for several long moments after Jake's final victory. Students and instructors sat frozen in their seats, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The human from the Death World had not just won his 3 demonstration matches. He had won them using methods that challenged everything the Academy taught about combat. Jake helped Salix collect his energy staff from where it had rolled across the platform. The Mentari warrior was still shaking his head in amazement, flexing his fingers to make sure they still worked properly, after losing his mental connection to the arena's equipment. "I have trained for 7 years to master combat meditation," Salix said quietly. "My instructors told me that the patterns were too complex for most species to understand. Yet you solved them in minutes." Jake handed the staff back to his opponent. "I had good teachers back on Earth. They taught me that every system has rules, and once you understand the rules, you can predict how the system will behave." Master Zethka approached them, his compound eyes reflecting the arena's lights like tiny mirrors. The insect instructor moved more slowly than usual, as if he was thinking about something important while he walked. "Human Morrison," the master said, "I must ask you a direct question. Are your capabilities typical of your species, or are you exceptional among humans?" Jake considered the question carefully. He did not want to lie, but he also did not want to give away too much information about human military capabilities. "I'm a good soldier, Master, but I'm not unique. Every human soldier learns similar techniques. We have to because Earth is dangerous and our enemies are always changing." Instructor Halvex moved closer, its crystal body pulsing with colors that Jake had learned indicated deep thought. "You speak of enemies that are always changing. What does this mean?" "On Earth, we fight many different kinds of opponents," Jake explained. "Sometimes we fight other humans who have different training and different weapons. Sometimes we fight animals that are bigger and stronger than we are. Sometimes we fight in hot places, cold places, wet places, or dry places. We never know what kind of challenge we'll face next, so we have to be ready for everything." Master Velthera joined the group on the platform. "This explains your adaptability, but not your knowledge of anatomy. How did you know the nerve locations, for species you had never encountered before?" Jake smiled slightly. "Humans study biology because we need to understand how living things work. We study our own bodies, animal bodies, and now alien bodies. The basic principles are the same everywhere. Hearts pump blood, nerves carry signals, joints allow movement. Find the common patterns, and you can understand any body. The three instructors exchanged those silent communications again. Jake was beginning to think they could speak to each other without making sounds, perhaps through some kind of mental connection or chemical signals he could not detect. Students began to file out of the arena, but Jake noticed that many of them were stopping to talk in small groups. Some were looking at him with respect, others with curiosity, and a few with what might have been concern. Word about the humans' fighting style would spread quickly through the station. "Human Morrison," Master Zethka said finally, "we need to discuss what has happened here today. Please join us in the instructors' conference room in 1 hour. We have much to talk about." Jake bowed politely to the three masters. "Of course, should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," Instructor Halvex replied, its musical voice carrying a note Jake had not heard before. "And perhaps your honesty." After the instructors left, Jake found himself alone on the platform with his three defeated opponents. Rixtor had returned to watch the final match, and now all three aliens were studying him with obvious interest. "Human Jake," Rixtor said, "may I ask you something?" "Sure. When you defeated me, you could have caused serious injury, but you chose not to. When you defeated Kreshnar, you could have damaged his armor, but you found a way to win without breaking anything. When you defeated Salix, you could have taken his weapon and used it against him, but you helped him recover it instead. Why do you fight with such restraint?" Jake sat down on the edge of the platform, letting his legs dangle over the side. "Because you're not my enemies. You're my classmates. The goal was to demonstrate fighting techniques, not to hurt people. A good warrior knows the difference between training and real combat." Kreshnar's heavy footsteps announced his approach. The big Thagani had been watching from the audience during the final match. "On my world, we believe that strength without honor is worthless. You fight with great strength, human, but also with great honor." Salix nodded in agreement. "There is wisdom in your fighting style. You use only as much force as necessary to achieve your goal. This is very difficult to do when your blood is running hot from combat. Humans learn early that unnecessary violence usually creates more problems than it solves," Jake said. "We try to end fights quickly and cleanly with minimal damage to everyone involved." The three aliens sat down near Jake, forming a small circle on the platform. For a few minutes, they talked about fighting techniques and training methods from their different worlds. Jake learned that Rixtor's people practiced combat as a form of dance, while Kreshnar's species treated it as a test of personal strength. Sally's people saw fighting as a moving meditation that connected the warrior to the universe around them. "Your species treats combat differently than any of ours," Rixtor observed. "You approach it like a science, but you also understand it as an art. You study it like scholars, but you practice it like warriors." "Humans have had a long time to think about fighting," Jake said. "We've been doing it for thousands of years, and we've learned that there's always more to learn." An hour later, Jake made his way to the instructor's conference room. The corridors of the station seemed busier than usual, with more students and staff moving around than Jake had seen before. Several aliens nodded to him as he passed, showing a level of respect that had not been there that morning. The conference room was larger than Jake had expected, with a curved table that could seat about 20 people. Only the three masters were there, along with two other instructors Jake had not met. A large screen on one wall showed video recordings of his three matches. Master Zeth Ka gestured for Jake to sit across from the group of instructors. "Human Morrison, we have been reviewing your performance today. Your fighting style raises some important questions about human capabilities that we need to understand." Jake sat down carefully. The chairs were designed for multiple species, but they still felt strange to his human body. "What kind of questions?" "Strategic questions," Instructor Halvex said. "If your abilities are typical of human soldiers, then our understanding of your species' military potential needs to be revised significantly." Master Velthara leaned forward. "We originally invited humans to join this exchange program because we wanted to study Deathworld adaptation, We expected to see superior reflexes, enhanced strength, and aggressive tactics. Instead, we have discovered something much more concerning. Concerning? Jake asked. Intelligence, Master Zethka said simply. Your species appears to have weaponized knowledge itself. You study your opponents, analyze their weaknesses, and adapt your tactics in real time. This is not what we expected from a primitive Deathworld species. Jake felt a moment of irritation at being called primitive, but he kept his voice calm. Humans aren't primitive. We're just young compared to most galactic species. We've been fighting for survival since we first walked upright, and we've gotten very good at learning from our experiences. One of the unknown instructors spoke up. How good? What is the extent of human military knowledge? Jake chose his words carefully. We study everything: history, tactics, technology, psychology, biology, physics. We learn from every war we've ever fought, every battle we've ever won or lost. We study our enemies so we can defeat them, and we study our allies so we can fight beside them effectively. The instructors exchanged those silent communications again. Jake could see that they were having some kind of serious discussion about what he had told them. Human Morrison, Master Zethka said finally, we have a proposal for you. We would like you to remain at this academy not as a student, but as an instructor. We believe there is much you could teach us about adaptive combat theory. Jake blinked in surprise. You want me to teach aliens how to fight? We want you to teach us how to think, Instructor Halvex corrected. Your species approaches problems in ways that are completely foreign to most galactic civilizations. This could be valuable knowledge for all of us. Jake thought about the offer for a moment. He had come to the academy to learn, but it seemed like he had more to teach than he had realized. What would I be teaching? Pattern recognition, adaptive, tactics, anatomical analysis, and strategic thinking, Master Velthera said. We want to understand how humans can be so effective in combat despite lacking the natural advantages of most warrior species. Jake smiled. I'd be honored to accept, but I have one condition. Which is, I want to keep learning too. I came here to study galactic combat techniques, and there's still a lot I don't know. Master Zethka's mandibles clicked, and what Jake had learned was the Thrakari equivalent of laughter.